behalf of the Bombay Jazz Club in the Music for Good series. I'd like to welcome you to a podcast with Joel Harrison. Joel Harrison, in addition to being an old friend of mine from way back over 35 years ago, we used to go strong, do a lot of projects together, a lot of adventures and merriment, and it's been a real pleasure to see the growth of Joel and his vision over all these years. He has some incredible music that he's produced, working with some of the finest musicians in the world. And he's also created some amazing educational initiatives. And he's going to be talking about a very important upcoming event called the Alternative Guitar Summit. Joel Harrison, welcome to our podcast.
Greetings. Thanks for having me.
Great. It's a real pleasure having you here. I'm really so enthusiastic about having the Alternative Guitar Summit go online. What was once available to people who would attend in person is now available to people all over the world. And this is probably one of the first times that people in our territory, in India and Asia and beyond, have an opportunity to study with the real New York cats and some of the most talented guitar players on the planet that you've assembled. Your friends, collaborators, have put together an incredible package. Could you please tell us as much as you can about the Alternative Guitar Summit?
Absolutely. My goal in this is to collect some of the greatest minds in the world together in one place, so that any musician, but especially guitar players, can access their wisdom. Face-to-face is ideal, which we do in our camp every summer. And we'll still be doing that, by the way, at the end of August in the New York State region. But because of the pandemic, of course, we've gone online for some of our events. And this springtime event brings together an extraordinary group of individuals: Bill Frisell, Nels Cline, Mike Stern, Cheryl Bailey, Adam Rogers, Adam Levy, and myself, to teach 90-minute classes in tandem. Often, by the way, there's two teachers at once, which makes it fun because they interact with each other and probe each other for questions. And my goal in this is to bring the wisdom of these super experienced, super heavy players straight to you.
Are these sessions highly structured and supported, say, with study materials or notes or any particular agenda which can maintain some kind of continuity from the session to a part of one's own regular practice growth and routine?
Great question. Yes, there is a curriculum that's outlined in the sign up page. I'll give you a couple of examples because, of course, we want people to know specifically what the artist will talk about, because they could talk about so many different things. And I'll give you a few examples. For instance, Mike Stern will talk about how he uses diminished scales and approach tones to create those incredible bebop jazz rock lines famous for. Bill Frisell will talk about the art of playing solo, which so many of us have had to cultivate this season. Ben Monder, who's an extraordinary soloist as well, will unpack one of his solo arrangements as well. He's got these extraordinary arrangements of jazz tunes that involve this gorgeous counterpoint. Let's see, Nels Cline, who's famous for being in the rock band Wilco, but of course has been a pioneer in improvisation on the guitar for, decades. We'll talk about how he writes music and puts together a record. it's really interesting. Nels is largely a self-taught musician, and his process is unique, and he's unique, and he often does not get a chance to talk about his own writing, which is exquisite and unusual, and sometimes gorgeous, and sometimes just antic and wild. And so he'll take you through the process of what it means to construct these vehicles for his band and then put them to tape and put it out in the world.
Wow. So you have a whole range from technical nuts and bolts to the creative process itself, and how to take these things we've learned, these musical ideas we've learned, and then structure our own creative expression from them.
Each of the players, of course, and I like to emphasize this, is part of this large community of modern musicians that comes from so many backgrounds and has worked on and studied and learned so many things. Sure, there's a lot of jazz vocabulary in what some of these folks do, but I think all of them do much more than play jazz. Some of them are incredible rock players, blues players, even country players. And what they share is a desire to find their own path with music.
What I've seen, a lot of guitarists learn a lot of chords and scales and modes and intervals. All that they do, they get some technique going, and they don't know what to do. You know, it's like a lot of people play an instrument, but they don't really belong to a tradition. And what I'd be most interested in is how does a musician take what they already know, which is usually far more knowledge that people have than they actually deploy in a real situation, and
Yeah.
put it to work. And is that sounds like something that might be addressed in this summit.
Well, that's a wonderful point. And of course, you're such a good teacher that you know that that's the real question, isn't it? Because you can accumulate knowledge your whole life, and if you don't know what to do with it, what good is it? And
There you
so
go, man.
take Bill Frisell as an example, because he's a mystifying player, because he does so little and yet so much at the same time. And it seems kind of magical. You think, oh, I could do that. Try to do it, and you can't. And I think the wonderful thing about watching him in process like this is you see how he's got this vast storehouse of information that gets funneled and boiled down this very essential sound. And to hear him talk about it is fascinating, because it demystifies the process.
When you talk about somebody of the stature of Bill Frisell, so much of what he does depends on the actual tone of his instrument, as if that's the energy that animates all the ideas, is that incredible tone that he gets. Will people be discussing gear, tech, settings, pedals, effects, how to actually develop a tone? That is a big mystery to a lot of folks. It would be great if that's on the menu.
You know, that is something that we've talked about in our camp before. It's a little easier to talk about in person, because you can see the person's effects and kind of experience it in real time. But yes, I think that's a wonderful question. And it's the type of thing that, for instance, you know, if someone's able to be with us in real time, they can pop that question onto the chat box, and we could ask some of these artists that question. I will say that this is a very mysterious thing with somebody like Bill Frisell, because he makes everything sound like him, no matter what he's playing, what amp it is, what effects he's using. So this is a big
Mhm.
subject, but I think it is an important one, and we'll try to address it. Yes.
Yeah, so it seems like it's a very broad canvas that guitar players of all stripes will get great benefit. Can you tell us who would be the most likely demographic to benefit from the Guitar Summit?
I think that if you're just beginning, it might be a little bit difficult to grasp what folks are talking about. But I think if you're a novice, an upcoming player with some rudimentary experience with harmony and time, and playing single note lines, all the way up to an extremely advanced player, you'll get a tremendous amount out of this. And I don't think it would just be guitarists that will learn for this, because after all, we're really talking about music here, not
Yeah.
something that's particular to the guitar. I've been around a while. I've been playing for many, many years, and no one learns more than me from this. So you're I can't imagine a situation where even the teachers themselves will learn from their colleagues.
Mm.
That's how I look at this.
So it really is a summit, as you call it, the Alternative Guitar Summit. It really brings together some of the greatest minds in the world and gives anybody on the planet an opportunity to partake. Even if I would think even a beginner would like benefit enormously just in terms of being inspired by being in the presence of musicians of this stature, because it is an incredible cast of characters you've assembled. Another question is, once you join, you can access these sessions at your own convenience from your website archives. Is that correct?
For 2 weeks, yes.
Okay. And you can watch it over and over if you like. Um, that material is there and available, so one could get very motivated and keep looking at it over and over for 2 weeks before it alas becomes unavailable on your site. So that's a great window. People have 2 weeks that they could really dig some gold here. So I think it's a brilliant structure. I'm saying this because a lot of our listeners are from the Asia Pacific region, and
Yeah.
would be curious as to whether they could access this at their own convenience. So that's
Yeah.
very helpful. That's very
And
helpful.
I will be available by email for questions during that
Mhm.
period. Well, if somebody says, for instance, I don't quite understand what Mike means when he's talking about this melodic minor scale over uh, a C sharp 7 sharp 9 chord, I'll try to answer
Right.
for them, even if it
Right.
means writing Mike and saying, Mike, can you answer this?
Nice. Okay. So that does have um, potential for interactivity, which is so anybody who participates can send in questions. I'm sure some will be addressed and based on availability of time, but
Yes.
it seems like a structured so that people could really get a lot of their own queries resolved. That's good. Joel, you mentioned that you might have scholarships available. Could you talk about that?
Yeah. The price per day is $80, which I hope is affordable to folks. And I like to point out that just to take an individual lesson with these artists would probably be twice that. So we try to make it affordable, but I know it's tough times and some people don't have a dollar to spare. So on a first come, first serve basis, if you're, uh, I would say, um, a qualified musician, somebody who's really um, at a pretty advanced level already, and you need some help, please let us know. And there'll be uh, a email to the sign up page. I should say there already is, where you can address those requests.
Okay, great. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to send out your information with our podcast to all our recipients. We'll get the full kit, so they'll be able to hear us speak, and then all the materials will be available to them, so they can hurry up and sign up, and
Great.
perhaps ask for that. Well, that's good. Can you talk about some of the events you've done in the past? You've covered the ground with a lot of great musicians. It would be nice to know how those artists have played a role in the evolution of your initiative.
Oh man. Well, it's been exciting because I've been doing it for 10 years, and I've almost worked with everybody at this point. There are a couple of exceptions. Pat Metheny, we interviewed and played his music 3 years ago. Bill Frisell as well, we featured. But I want to say that my mission is primarily one of lifting up this slightly lesser known players that aren't household names like these guys. So there's probably been 50 or 60 guitarists that we've featured, that if you're really in the know, you've heard of, whether it's Nir Felder, Dave Fusinski, or Brandon Ross, Michael Gregory Jackson. But
oh yeah,
it's a range of styles and approaches, from the most wild avant-garde to more inside jazz playing to jazz rock. Anybody who improvises on the guitar. And we've had to be specific to some degree to the New York region, of course, just logistics demand that. But my goodness, there are just so many great players in that region that it's been some splendid events honoring Jim Hall. We're honoring Pat Martino coming up. Yeah, it's been quite a learning experience.
Well, my next question is, for me, this is one of the most important questions I'm going to ask you. And this is, after 10 years of working with all these artists, I presume that this has been documented. How much of this material is available to people who want to dig back in the archives and avail of these inspiring moments that you've created over the years?
Well, many of our concerts were filmed, some quite professionally, some a little less so. And what I finally decided to do, and I'm going to launch this in the spring, is create a Patreon subscription page, which will hopefully be very affordable, where I will upload footage from our past events on a continual basis for anybody who wants to pay whatever it is, the $5 or $10 a month to see it. So there's been some extraordinary one-of-a-kind events that we will share with folks.
I think that's really important, and that you, whether you like it or not, bro, you really the custodian of this incredible period of time that we live in, the material by some of our finest artists, and you probably have one of the largest collections of this, valuable content, and I'm sure people want to get all over this because it's truly remarkable what you've managed to put together. It would be a shame if this was not available, seeing that you've put so much energy and thoughtfulness into this process. We demand that it be available. Joel, we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about in the remaining time we have here?
I'd love to talk about the concert series, which is going to be online later in March after the camp. Again, every year in New York City, I present 3 live shows, all with different themes, with many of the guitar players we've discussed. But we're online this year, so it's an extraordinary lineup that we've brought together. And March 20th, we'll honor the great guitarist Pat Martino, who's still with us. And 12 guitarists will play his music, his compositions. And we are going into a studio to do this. We're videotaping it professionally. And it's going to be just incredible event with Adam Rogers and Kurt Rosenwinkel, Oz Noy, Reza Bassi, some different wonderful guitar players, Dave Stryker, Paul Polenbach. And then the next day, the 21st of March on Sunday in the afternoon, which is important because I think it'll be a little easier to access it from India. There will be 7 brief solo concerts from around the world from people's living rooms. Nels Klein, Henry Kaiser, Mary Halverson, Nguyen Lee, Michael Gregory Jackson, etc.
And is that going to be available for a period of time, or do you have to get it hot out of the oven?
Well, that will be available for 48 hours afterwards. So yeah, with the time difference, it's still to log on and check it out after the fact.
Yeah, well, that's a very practical window for most enthusiasts. They find the time to do that across all time zones of the world. It sounds like you've really organized this well. You've thought about the big picture and how to maximize your audience and spread the great news to people, man. I mean, this is a dream come true, particularly from many of us folks from before the internet age. This is just an extraordinary opportunity which one could have never dreamed of 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And
it's important to me. I think all of us are a little burned out on seeing things online. I get that. And yet when I really asked myself whether I should do this, it seemed very clear to me that in this difficult time we're all living in, that the more beauty and wisdom that we can put out there right now, the better. And if there is any silver lining to this pandemic, it's that all of us have had to rethink the idea of meeting in person and try to create something extraordinary that can be shared through our technology. And one thing I wanted to be sure to do was take advantage of this by including people who don't live in New York City. So that's what's exciting to me. All of a sudden, I have Nguyen Lee, who's one of my favorite players, performing live from France. And then also to make sure it's done professionally. People look at this, it's going to look good and sound good.
There you go. Right down to the technicals, from concept to delivery. You've really worked it out. Well, Joel, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. It's been an inspiring session we've had here. I guess the next thing that lies ahead for us is to actually experience what you've created, and we hope to be able to work with you on an ongoing basis, man, and bring your projects to the rest of the world, particularly in this part of the planet. So well, thanks so much for being with us, man.
You've helped me see, because you live over there, just how many incredible and enthusiastic musicians there are in India and Asia as a whole for this kind of music. And it's a wonderful thought to me that I can help disseminate this information to all these folks over there who might never get it otherwise. So I welcome everybody from Asia, and please become part of our community.
Sounds great. Well, thanks again, Joel. We hope to be catching up with you again in our podcast series as it unfolds with your new adventures. Really appreciate all your inputs, all your achievements, and looking forward to more great initiatives from your side.